I'm Steve Franczyk. I'm a retired professor of political science from the U.S. Naval Academy.
Hello, West Virginia. My name is Tom Vontz. I'm a professor at Kansas State University.
My name is Tom Tinder. I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
And who are you?
I'm Austin Smith, a senior from Clay County High School.
I'm Jefferson Hymer. I'm also a senior.
I'm Nicholas Evans, and I'm a junior, and we represent Unit 6 from West Virginia, and our teacher is Mr. Philip Dobbins.
Well, great. Let me read the question. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King said, quote, "Never in the history of this nation have so many people been arrested for a cause of freedom and human dignity," unquote. What lessons can be learned from the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama? What is civic engagement, and what is its significance in American history? What responsibility, if any, do schools have to promote civic engagement? You may begin.
Action expressed very well with civic engagement or civic participation, which is any individual or group actively addressing issues of public concern through paying taxes, voting, signing petitions, volunteering in one's community, and so on. Civic engagement also includes communities working together in both political and non-political actions. The goal of civic engagement is to address public concerns and promote the overall quality of the community.
Civil disobedience is an easy way to promote civic engagement. The definition of civil disobedience is the refusal to comply with certain laws or to pay taxes and fines as a peaceful form of political protest. The civil rights movement was mainly nonviolent protests under Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and one of the first of the protests was the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, which ended segregated seating on public transit buses.
The children of Birmingham realized what they had to do, and they stood up for what they felt was their civic duty, even when their parents discouraged it. This can be tied in now with the climate strike, which mainly consists of students skipping school to strike for the climate, much like what these children in Birmingham did, but with.
One example that is easily overlooked that consisted primarily of children is the March of the Mill Children ran by Mother Jones in 1903. Their goal was to protest the dangerous working conditions children face in these mills to support their families. These children began marching in Philadelphia and completed their movement in New York at the home of President Theodore Roosevelt. This march's goal, however, was not completed until the Fair Labor Standards Act was signed in 1938 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Civic engagement serves as the only way for the people to play a role in their government. A democratic government is supposed to be an expression of the volonté générale of the people, as per Muden Kultzwasser. Therefore, civic engagement is also vital to the functioning process of the government. If the people do not express their beliefs or desires, how can the government function?
Punish the robber, not the robbed, essentially is an idea that the African Americans of the United States were being wrongfully mistreated and the ones mistreating them were being praised. Dr. King stated this in his letter from a Birmingham jail.
Civic engagement also serves as a way of giving minorities power to make change as well. Often in the world, minorities are overlooked and suppressed either on purpose or as an effective action by the majority. Larger and more prominent forms of civic engagement, such as assembling and civil disobedience, allows this minority to pressure the government or body they're acting towards to consider their beliefs.
When it comes to civic engagement, schools have a responsibility to promote ideas such as voting. Schools should be required to make sure their students graduate high school knowing their basic rights as United States citizens. Students should know that via the First Amendment, that as citizens of the United States, they have the right to peacefully assemble, petition the government, and say and express their opinions. According to the First Amendment Center of the Freedom Forum Institute, as of 2019, 71% of respondents can name at least one right in the First Amendment. However, while it is not against the law to have a discussion about a topic, it is prohibited for a teacher to force their ideas and morals upon a student.
Regarding schools' responsibility to teach and encourage civic engagement, as Nicholas stated, schools should play a large role. However, a line must be drawn between encouraging civic engagement and expressing biased views on political topics in hopes of forcing the students to believe a specific idea. It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights of freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, as said by Justice Fortas in mention on Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969. But still, teachers are prohibited from describing their own beliefs as better than or anything other than equal to the other beliefs on the topic, and thus making any attempt of proselytizing their captive audience.
Thank you very much. as you might guess, we've got some follow-up questions. Let's explore a little bit more the link between civic engagement and the Constitution, and in the sense that what are the things that the Constitution does to promote civic education, and what does it do to thwart civic engagement?
The Constitution, first and foremost, promotes civic engagement largely by just the inclusion of the First Amendment. The First Amendment gives the people the right to petition the government and peaceably assemble. Yeah.
Based off what Jefferson was saying, one thing that can hinder it and is they put time, place, manner restrictions on these different protests, and you also a lot of times have to have a permit to do so. Civil disobedience is to where you break laws to protest, and in the civil rights movement they did not have these permits, but they were peaceful. But now we have time, place, manner restrictions, which place an area that you have to protest, a specific area, what times you can do it, and how you have to do it, and whether or not police can be present.
Let's turn our attention to civil disobedience for a second. Is civil disobedience always an appropriate civic engagement tool?
Can you repeat the question? You cut out for me.
Yeah, is civil disobedience always justified?
It depends on the situation and the reason for the civic disobedience. So I think a perfect example of a time that civic disobedience was good was the Montgomery bus boycott and the protests that followed suit after, because these African American citizens were rightfully upset about segregation and they were fighting to end segregation.
Okay.
It all depends on the way you stand when it comes to the movement. You could personally agree or disagree with the movement. Like Austin said, I personally agree with the Montgomery bus boycott, but there's different movements out there that I don't agree with. Like I personally don't agree with the climate strike going on with the children leaving school, but that's my own personal opinion. It's basically how you stand on what you believe.
Fantastic.
Turning to voting, a number of countries have mandatory voting, compulsory voting. Should we have compulsory voting in the United States? Why or why not?
I do not believe that United States should have compulsionary voting, because the Constitution gives us the right to choose if we want to engage civically in any way, regardless of the encouragement that a citizen receives. And statistically speaking, compulsionary voting in countries like Australia still does not make every person vote, but rather they still skip voting and pay the fine.
I personally agree with my colleague Jeff, but I personally disagree with my colleague Jeff. I believe that voting should be a mandatory thing, but the Constitution would very much disagree with me, because in the First Amendment, you have the freedom of expression, and that expression can be the freedom not to vote. So even though I believe that we should vote mandatorily, the Constitution itself does not believe that way.
There are a number of demonstrations going on now of civil disobedience against the COVID-19 virus sequesters that people are involved in. And are we going to look back and say this is a good example of civic engagement? And how should public officials respond?
You could definitely see this as a good example of civic engagement, because people are believing that we should not be in quarantine because of the virus. They believe we should be able to go back to work, which it's causing some controversy, but we can definitely look back at it in so many years that when this goes down in the history books as a good time of civic engagement. And not only with the civic engagement from the people protesting the quarantine, different companies such as Jack Daniels, they are going from making liquor to making hand sanitizer, which is a good way to be civically engaged. And this comes from John Locke and the theory of that people are for the common good. And it just goes down to the fact that people are wanting to help people even if they are taking a pay cut.
Now,
So,
I
go ahead.
disagree. What?
You go ahead.
Okay. I disagree with Nicholas's statement that that these protests are a good example of civic engagement. They are obviously civic engagement, but they are endangering the safety of everyone protesting and are endangering the country as a whole, because the more they protest to open up, the more the infection rates will rise and the longer that the country will have to stay closed.
I personally agree with my colleague Jeff, because I feel like these protesters are putting their lives in danger. And there's even been reports out of, I think, the state of Michigan, where these protesters are standing outside the governor, Gretchen Whitmer's house, and violently protesting, essentially almost becoming a riot.
Good job. We've got some feedback that you might guess that I thought you did a great job initially in terms of defining your concepts. You kind of laid those out for us, and so it was a good foundation for us to work forward. I thought that you had some unique kinds of applications that we had not seen before. You were good on the history of things. You could have done a little bit more in terms of some of the limits of the Constitution. The 18-year-old vote, the fact that non-citizens can't vote. It's not participation for everyone. But in general, I thought you did an excellent job.
Yeah, I agree, West Virginia. You should feel very good about your Unit 6 performance. I thought that you handled my question on civil disobedience, fairly well. It's not just any law that rises to the level of using civil disobedience, but it's got to be something really big. And you used the example of segregation and the Montgomery bus boycott. And you could add to that, not only does it have to be something big, but Dr. King also said you need to have at least tried to work within the system to get that law changed and before you push the civil disobedience button. But then you did a nice job grappling with the kind of the pros and cons of this modern current example of civil disobedience, right? And I was so happy that after Nicholas says, yeah, it's going to be good. Then and you gave some good reasons, Nicholas. But then you had a colleague that said, I'm not so fast. The government has a reason for wanting to restrict that, and that's really kind of the way it is with lots of political issues, as you've learned about in this program. Reasonable people can disagree just like you did. So good job, West Virginia.
I thought you did a very good job. I really liked your opening presentation. You went through it very well. I liked some of the examples you gave, particularly, of course, Mother Jones, and you mentioned also the Tinker case. I particularly liked the way you got it, so to speak, on the last question, where you each gave your opinion, backed up your opinion with evidence and facts, and that's what this whole competition is about, is just what is your opinion and can you back it up with facts and information. I thought you did a good job. Congratulations to you, particularly during these extraordinary times. Congratulations to you, the students, and to your teacher. Good luck.